What's up everybody and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we have the keys to the 2025 Toyota Land Cruiser alongside the 2009 Toyota FJ Cruiser. I'm here at Flow Toyota of Statesville. By the way, a one owner $25,000 FJ Cruiser. That is insane with well under 100,000 miles. That is a bargain. But today's video, I want to talk about basically the new Land Cruiser. I think this is really the new version of the old FJ Cruiser from these generations. Now I'm 31 years old. When the 200 series Land Cruiser came out around 2008, I was just getting into getting my permit and getting my license. So I feel like for me and my age group, that was never a Land Cruiser that was something of an icon for me. I always looked at that as a $100,000 big Toyota three-row SUV, nothing that I could remotely afford anytime soon, and nothing that I would want to take off-roading given it was the size of an Expedition. So for me, you can buy these for around $60,000, and they're actually nimble enough to go off-roading. They're much more affordable, and it reminds me of the FJ Cruiser. I remember when these came out, one of my friends had one as his first vehicle, and we ripped on that thing through the woods, through the trails, and it was so capable and always just a really cool vehicle. So with that said, let's get into some of the differences, how these compare, how they drive, and talk about what I think the Land Cruiser now is a bit more for the younger generation. I don't think the older generation is liking it as much because they look at the old Land Cruiser as kind of their icon. I think the new generation Land Cruiser is for a new generation buyer. So taking a look at the powertrains for the Toyota FJ Cruiser, this is going to feature a 4-liter naturally aspirated 6-cylinder motor with 239 horsepower and 278 pound-feet of torque, paired to either a 6-speed manual or the 5-speed automatic. Now for the new Toyota Land Cruiser, this now has the iForce Max, which is a 2.4-liter inline 4-cylinder turbocharged engine with a hybrid. This makes 326 horsepower with 465 pound-feet of torque, paired to an 8-speed automatic transmission. Now for the previous generation Land Cruiser, that had a 5.7-liter V8 with 381 horsepower and 401 pound-feet of torque, starting life with a 6-speed automatic, going up to an 8-speed in the final years. So maybe that's probably one of the biggest things to why the older generation isn't a fan. A 4-cylinder turbo hybrid, what the heck, where did the V8 go? However, we're gonna drive these. The modern technology has so much more power and torque, it's much more usable, smaller footprint for better off-roading. So to me, and I think maybe people under 30, I think we are seeing the appeal to a smaller engine with this technology because it's giving you a better driving experience and hopefully will be just as reliable as the old V8 and just like this V6 in the FJ Cruiser. So onto styling. So the FJ Cruiser, I remember when this came out, such a unique looking vehicle, just like the old FJ40s from way back in the 60s and 70s. You got those nice round headlights with the Toyota script written out in the old school design. Massive plastic front bumper with a way in which gives you lower overhangs. This plastic piece kind of sticks outward, but it's a really unique design for that bumper. And then you can see all that plastic trim throughout the side. Super boxy appearance with the two-tone. I've always liked that. This one's finished in the color brick. I like the roof rack on it as well. It is unique how it has 2 doors and then 2 mini doors behind it. And then in rear, you can see mainly the plastic for the rear bumper. I like the full-size spare as well. And then you do have a glass that will open up in the back. Now for this new generation Land Cruiser, honestly, there's some similarities. You have all the plastic as well for the lower portion of the bumper and surrounding all of the fender arches. You're also gonna get the rear glass that opens independently. Now, most of these can also come in a 2-tone color option. This one is the 1958 trim level, which is the base model, but you can get 2-tone on this just like on that FJ. And for these headlights, same with the first edition, you have the same round headlights and the exact same Toyota font written out in that front grille with more of a square shape to it. So these have a lot of similarities in exterior styling, which is really nice to see being an FJ fan from when I was a teenager. Moving to the interior, on the FJ, you're gonna get a manual physical key, which is definitely funny to see these days. For this, you're gonna insert it down here and you hold it to the right and that will pop, and then we can lift open the glass. There's a nice cutout to avoid that rear tire, and then you have a nice entry point into all this cargo space. For the modern Land Cruiser, much more tech savvy, you just press the button with a key in your pocket and we can lift up in the glass. So I like to see that as well, much larger in here as well. Manually close it. Now this one, we have the button right here and we can open up manually the entire lift gate. Now, it is sad to see the swing gate is no longer for the Land Cruiser, which was kind of iconic for cars like this back in the day. And on the FJ, if we go ahead and unlock it, we can swing this open and take a look. You're gonna get a pretty rugged cargo space here with an old school looking subwoofer, and you can see the texture on the backs of the seats to make this a pretty rugged vehicle for the family. And then over in the Land Cruiser, being a hybrid though, you do have a much taller load floor due to the hybrid system, but you still have a pretty simple squared off rear end to give you a ton of cargo space. So now inside the '09 Toyota FJ Cruiser, this brings back some memories. What a cool interior, nice and boxy. You're gonna see some fabric on the seats that was somewhat waterproof and water resistant. I love the gauges right here for the compass, outside temp, pitch and roll, and then a super squared off dashboard with an extra glove box right up in the center. For the gauge cluster, analog, old school as expected, leather wrapped steering wheel with just some volume controls. And then you even have some body color throughout the center with these massive toggles here for everything that you can use wearing gloves. We have a rear locking diff, traction control, A-track, parking sensors as well. Four-wheel drive select is down here in the manual form, and then of course the drivetrain select. You have cup holders, armrests, and storage all throughout it. And then a really cool boxy interior. Dashboard is really far away, super squared off. And we do have a little tiny backup camera popping up right there. It's about 1 inch, so kind of funny to see that. And then looking around, we have the back seats in here with those half doors and just a nice squared off interior. Moving on to the new Toyota Land Cruiser. Once again, pretty squared off interior, significantly different layout for the dash. And then the windshield is nice and squared off just like in the FJ. Now this one, we do have a digital screen for the gauge cluster, even for this base model. You can see all sorts of safety information that's gonna come up. And then there's an LCD screen in the center for multimedia, things like that that did not quite exist back in the day, but nice to see navigation and all that. And for this one, backup camera is much larger. Now we have climate controls now with toggles, so still easy to use. We have drive mode select right here with different drive modes, which is a new touch. And then there is downhill assist, crawl control. We have a locking rear and center diff, four-wheel drive low. So we have this toggle rather than that manual shift. And then of course your shifter right there. Again, fancy things like USB plugs, extra storage, fixed armrest in the center with a more traditional glove box for modern vehicles. And then we have our mirror up above with garage door buttons and a very squared off interior once again with full doors in the back. And this one has just the basic fabric interior, kind of matching the FJ quite honestly. A lot more basic plastics in this versus the higher trim level Land Cruisers, but honestly you can see some familiarity between the two vehicles even with the same side mirrors. So moving on to the rear seat space in the FJ. So this one, you open up your front door and then you reach around right in here and you have the lever to open up this in the reverse order. So pretty cool to see those types of doors on the old FJ Cruiser. And then in back, you have a nice 3-person bench seat. So sitting in the back of the FJ Cruiser, not a bad back seat, quite honestly. There's plenty of headroom. The headrest will pop upwards to give you a little bit better comfort. And then, like I said, a little bit of amenities. You can reach this. A little bit interesting closing the door, but it's actually a normal SUV back here, kind of like a 4Runner. So really nothing too bad. Windows back here give you pretty good amount of light as well, and good legroom overall. And then the seat bottoms will open up. As you can tell, you can get a little bit extra storage space in here, and then you can pop the buttons up above, fold these seats down, and you're gonna get a pretty good amount of cargo space into the rear. So let's set off now in the Toyota FJ Cruiser, reminisce of what this type of vehicle is all about. The windshield is so far away and just straight up and down. It's colored like a brick and it's shaped like a brick. So that is funny to see. The sound of the V6, it just sounds very familiar with basically all of Toyota's V6 vehicles. But just slowly driving, you have the 3 windshield wipers, which is also a really funny design. Always thought that was hilarious looking. But being in here, you know, you have a lot of plastics and everything. People like to make fun of modern Toyotas for being plastic as if they were ever covered in leather. Literally every single thing is made of plastic. So it's nothing new to be plasticky. At least in the higher trim Land Cruiser, you do have soft touch stuff all over the place. This does not have that sort of refinement. But in here, you know, you have those very vertical side mirrors. Pretty good view around actually for being so bulky and chunky. It still drives good. That's the good thing with these old Toyotas. You know, people love the reliability and dependability of them. They ride pretty normal and solid. It feels kind of like a tank definitely a cool thing to drive. And of course, we'll just do a little bit of gravel. I mean, I've been off-roading in these a long time ago. It is such a capable SUV. I mean, we drove this thing through some deep water. We jumped one of these actually back when you're 16 and your friend has a nice vehicle. That's kind of the things you end up doing. But this thing was a blast back in the day. I remember doing that. And I wanted to buy one actually. I ended up going for a Scion TC. So I ended up going the car world rather than the off-road world. But this has some nostalgic to it. And I feel like the FJ wasn't that expensive when it came out, but it wasn't the cheapest thing either. I feel like that price point is where this new Land Cruiser is, 60 to 70 grand. It's not cheap, but it's also not $100,000 like the old one used to be. This, I want to say, was maybe in the $40,000 range back when it was new. So it was basically up there with a 4Runner, which the new 4Runner is basically the same price point as the new Land Cruiser anyways. So the pricing all makes sense from 10, 15 years ago to the current market. But when you drive this, it's a smaller footprint. It's easy to know where this vehicle is, and yet it's roomy in here. It's spacious for the technology and age of this. This has the good technology for off-roading. Even some of the fancy stuff, like this has radio in it, might even have a 6-disc CD changer or something like that. But ending thoughts with the FJ Cruiser, I miss it. Like, I miss this generation. These were good. These were really cool. And it kind of just gives you a vehicle you know you can buy and depend on and go anywhere with. That was, I think, my big appeal to this size of an SUV. It's something where the trails that we have here, you can't take a big full-size vehicle on. There's too many trees, there's too many tight areas. You need something in the mid-size. So moving on to the new Toyota Land Cruiser. So technology-wise, this is so much different than not only the previous gen Land Cruiser, but obviously from the Toyota FJ Cruiser. So the 4-cylinder turbo hybrid, it gives you that EV power down low. Now it's not gonna be, you know, a self-driving car in electric mode or anything, but you have that assist and a ton of torque. More torque than the V8, more torque than the V6, better transmission, and just a lot of new technology, which of course is pretty sweet. Now we've off-roaded these in the mountains. We've spent 1,000 miles in the new Land Cruisers, and I adored driving this. Now I like the more mid-trim with the nicer interior. However, this 1958, the interior feels like the FJ with hard plastics. So I know, again, people make fun of the plastics in Toyotas. They've always been doing this. So this is about looks like what you would expect. Obviously, inflation in the last 20 years or so, 60 grand is the new 40 grand, basically. So with that said, though, this drives really smooth and really nice. I love these squared off windshields. It's a bit more normal than the FJ with a bit closer design. Still have good visibility and kind of that boxy retro feel. And then when you do hit the off-pavement stuff, I mean, this just conquers it. We had a blast off-roading in the Land Cruisers. They were so capable, and with the hybrid system, you barely have to give it a little bit of throttle, and you have that EV power to just get you moving. So it is really, really capable and confident off-road. You can easily place it. The hood is dipped down in the center to where I can really know exactly where this vehicle is. Right now we're in EV mode actually, so you can quietly conquer trails in the slow speed, which is a really cool touch. Going into the normal mode. Okay, so that's where this starts to shine. This has so much more usable power than the V8 and then the V6. It is peppy, it moves. I find it to drive just so good. The transmission is super smooth. The gearing is significantly better to where you're at low RPM, getting a little bit better MPG as well. And ride quality is good. It drives nice. It drives like a tank, just like in the FJ. It feels solid and tough. You're nice and high up, and it's still a good family vehicle with plenty of space for everybody, cargo space, all that random stuff. It has everything that the FJ has in it, just in a modern vehicle. And honestly, it takes what the old Land Cruiser was all about, maybe from the early generations, and gives you it in the new generation. The previous generation Land Cruiser, again, is just so big for most trails. I know maybe people do more overlanding with that style, but even then, it's few and far between just because, I mean, it's a $100,000 vehicle. How many people are actually off-roading and overlanding in a 6-figure SUV? It seemed like the previous gen Land Cruiser was more businessmen, things like that. They would buy those vehicles instead of a Mercedes or a BMW. That way, when they went to work, you know, when they were the owners of the work, their employees didn't get jealous with a $100,000 Mercedes. They'd see a big SUV from Toyota and they wouldn't think much of it. That's kind of what I've seen a lot of people talk about the previous generation Land Cruiser. It was the wealthy businessman's luxury high-end vehicle without showing off that you're in a luxury expensive vehicle. So I feel like this new generation Land Cruiser, it goes back to the basics where the Land Cruiser was years before, where it was more of a utilitarian off-roader, and they've given it a nice premium feel to it, especially if you get a nicer trim level than the base model. But this specific trim definitely reminds me of that FJ that we were just in. It really does feel similar to it. It just seems like this is the new FJ Cruiser. While the new 4Runner replaced the old 4Runner, this replaced the FJ Cruiser. And I don't think Toyota was looking to replace the previous Land Cruiser with anything new, because the new Sequoia has taken over. The new Sequoia is their flagship big jumbo SUV that's luxurious, doesn't exactly show off that you have an expensive $80,000 vehicle, but it is a luxury SUV with all the top stuff. So the Sequoia is the new Land Cruiser. The new Land Cruiser is the new Toyota FJ Cruiser. And I think this is appealing to a younger demographic. New Sequoia is definitely going to be appealing to a bit older demographic. So after driving in the Toyota FJ Cruiser alongside the newest, the 2025 Toyota Land Cruiser, those are my thoughts. Comment below, what do you guys think? The Land Cruiser is an iconic name. There's a lot of people who love this vehicle for decades and decades. And the new one has been met with controversy, of course, being a 4-cylinder turbo hybrid. That's just not what you're used to from a Land Cruiser, especially looking back at the V8. But I think when you look at Toyota's spectrum of vehicles, the new Sequoia, while it's, again, not a V8, it's a turbo hybrid V6, that's the new old Land Cruiser. That's the new big boy luxury jumbo SUV from Toyota. You can get luxury trims, you can get off-road trims, and it is a tank. It's also very large for a lot of people. The FJ Cruiser, that was such a cool vehicle for its day, and nothing truly replaced it until this came along. The new Toyota Land Cruiser is that younger buyer. They're not quite looking for the 4Runner because they want something that does have more heritage to it. Obviously the 4Runner has heritage, but this has a little bit different type of heritage to it, and it offers a bit more rugged feeling. It's a bit more luxurious too. So the Land Cruiser is more that niche market where the FJ used to be. So anyways, that is it for today's video comparing the new Land Cruiser to the Toyota FJ Cruiser. Comment below, what do you guys think? How is Toyota doing placing these new vehicles that they are coming out with? Big shout out to Flow Toyota of Statesville for providing this one owner FJ Cruiser. That's crazy to see alongside the new Toyota Land Cruiser. Check out their website, links down below. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for plenty more content. I'll see you all in the next video.